With both Canon and Nikon's recent announcement of their full-frame cameras, I think it's safe to say that the age of the mirrorless camera is basically here, and the DSLR is going to be dead soon. Mark my words. It's still alive, it's still very much alive at the moment, but going forward, that will change. That will change drastically in the next 2 to 3 years, and you know, I've had people say, no, that's not going to happen. Well, look at where we are today, guys. This is the Mirrorless Wars. Where do you even begin with the mirrorless cameras? It's not like the DSLRs are taking bad pictures, right? They're still taking amazing pictures, and you can still take the same kind of quality pictures as you can with a mirrorless camera. So it's not like the quality's not there. It's just simply that, you know, the technology has come on so much that people want the new technology. You don't find yourself buying a dumpster truck freaking car to take your kids to school. No, you buy yourself a nice comfy ride that's got cruise control, that's got air conditioning. Do you need these things? No, but you still buy it, and it's the same with cameras. We want the new technology. We want touchscreens, we want face and eye autofocus, etc, etc. And that's where mirrorless cameras really are pushing their way into the market, and they've come a long way. I believe currently Sony is the best selling full frame camera on the market at the moment, and that's both DSLR and mirrorless. Not just mirrorless, this is both of them across all sections. It's like a snowball. To begin with, it's kind of small and it's not going very quick, but as it slowly rolls down that hill, it's going to build up momentum, and that's exactly what's happening in the mirrorless world. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. I just want to talk about today the kind of options that you might have if you're looking at possibly buying a mirrorless camera, a full frame mirrorless camera to be precise. You can go for a crop sensor like the Fujis or Micro Four Thirds, the Olympus and the Panasonics, which are fantastic cameras, and if that's something you want to buy, definitely check them out. They are absolutely brilliant. But we're just going to talk about mirrorless full frame cameras at the moment. So Sony, Nikon and Canon, and what your options are, or your basic options. Super quick disclaimer, I've not used the new Canon R mount or the Nikon's Z mount or Z mount or whatever you want to call it. Bloody stupid name if you ask me. Regardless, I've used the Sony a7 III since about March time for weddings, which is my bread and butter. It's what I do for a daily kind of job. So I'm a little bit biased towards Sony, but do I think Sony is the absolute dog's bollocks? No, actually. There are certain areas that it is absolute bollocks, to be, if I'm quite frank, but it's actually a very, very good system. But I'm not going to just try and push Sony towards you, because I think both Nikon and Canon have some really useful features on their cameras. So let's have a look. So all the three cameras I'm going to say about is the Sony a7 III, the Canon R mount, or R, ESO, R, whatever, and the Nikon Z6, because they're all in the rough kind of price range. They're all about £2,000, give or take. It depends on whether you buy it with an adapter or not. So it's about £2,000 for that base camera. I know you can argue that, you know, Sony's on their 3rd generation of cameras, but that's now their base model, so that's why I'm using that particular camera. So I'm going to compare these basically 3 cameras, because each one, believe it or not, has positives and negatives, including Sony, and I want to just go through them and just say what I think, really. It's going to be quite interesting, actually, because while I really love my Sonys, I don't think they're perfect, and there's actually things on both the Nikon and the Canon that I think would look or be much better on the Sony. But hey, this is just my thoughts. So in terms of sheer megapixels, you're going to buy the Canon. It's got 30 megapixels, the Nikon's got 24.5 megapixels, and the Sony's actually got the least. It's just 24 megapixels, sorry, 24. So if you just want pure megapixels, you're going to buy the Canon. It's going to be basically in line with the 5D Mark IV sensor technology. It's just an adapted sensor from the 5D4. Pretty much. So yeah, that's a very good sensor. It's a very good sensor. I've used the 5D Mark IVs for a couple of years now. They're fantastic cameras, so I can't really knock them too much. They're very, very good. Are they as good as mirrorless cameras? Well, that's kind of a personal opinion. I don't think so. But the actual sensor, pure megapixel, just buy the Canon. But that's not the whole picture, because when we actually look at cameras, you and I, we already know this, we're looking for other things like how the ISO performs, the dynamic range, and this is where the Canon isn't quite as strong. Now granted, the new EOS R and the Nikon Z6 aren't fully tested in the field, so we don't 100% know what the kind of qualities the images are going to produce, but we do know where the Sony is at, and that is producing fantastic pictures, even at really high ISO, lots of dynamic range. It's a brilliant system. So I think if you're looking for overall image quality, until we get basically full confirmation of what the new cameras are like, go for the Sony, because it's fantastic. It's pretty much a market leader, or just about a market leader. Can it be improved? Certainly, but at the moment it's absolutely amazing. But I'll be very interested to see what both the Nikon and the Canon can produce. I'm guessing Nikon's going to be well, if it's as good as a previous DSLRs, it's going to be absolutely amazing. Canon, I can see them falling a little bit behind on this, but again, if you're looking for just pure megapixels to blow up a huge cameras, buy the Canon. Something else both Canon and Nikon have gotten similar, they've both got a dial on the top so you can actually see what your settings are. Sony unfortunately doesn't have this. I'm guessing because it's a smaller camera body. Both the Nikon and the Canon are slightly larger, so if you've got bigger hands than me, I've got baby hands, then those cameras are going to be definitely preferable. So that's certainly something to think about. If you like the dial on top because you find that useful for you, brilliant. Is it massively useful because a lot of the information is going to be actually on the screen on the back of the camera? I can't tell you, you know, it's got to be your choice. If you're shooting in bright, harsh conditions, it might be very useful. So hey, it's up to you. All three of the cameras, so Sony, Nikon and Canon, they all have touchscreens, and this is where Sony shit the bed basically. Their touchscreen is absolutely, I don't care how much I hate this touchscreen. It is crap. It is, oh, it's dog shit. But both Nikon and Canon, they look like they've got very good touchscreens. The touchscreen on the 5D Mark IV and a couple of the other newer cameras that Canon made was simply brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. You can go for all the menus, you could do absolutely everything that you could possibly want to do with the touchscreen on the back of the camera, and it's looking to be the same with the Nikon as well. Sony, again, they shit the bed on this one. You can't go through any of the menus, you basically can't swipe through your images, you can't pinch and zoom, you can double tap, wow, that's awesome, and you can select where you want the focus point to be, but it won't actually take the actual picture or anything like that. It's just a horrible system. It's just, Sony, you could sort this out. So touchscreen, I really like this on my 5D Mark IVs. So yeah, if touchscreen's really important to you, don't buy the Sony at all. It's the worst mistake you'll ever make. All three cameras also shoot 4K. Now the quality of that 4K again is to be determined, and the autofocus performance on them as well is to be determined. This is where I'm guessing that Nikon will actually fall behind, mainly in the autofocus. The actual video quality generally is okay. It's only something that super nerdy people are going to really notice. Sorry if you're a super nerd, but that's absolutely true. Your general consumer won't notice much difference. If you're looking for crop factor, this is where Canon absolutely falls apart, because it's got a 1.7 crop on the actual 4K footage. So anybody that's doing like vlogging or something like that, where it's at about an arm's distance, you're not going to get your full benefit from your lenses. You need to set the camera up way further away, or much further away, to get a decent frame on it. So yeah, Canon, they've basically purposely sabotaged the 4K in this camera. It's not unusable, but there you go, it's a 1.7 crop. The autofocus, however, for the Canon and the Sony, the Canon, we've actually seen some people reviewing it. The autofocus is absolutely fantastic, you know, and it's the same with the Sony. Sony's got very good autofocus. So I'm guessing if 4K is really important to you, it's a really tough one actually, because you got really good autofocus on both Canon and the Sony. Potentially not so good on the Nikon, but then you got the 1.7 crop on the Canon. It's a mindfuck basically. So I can't tell you which one. I can't tell you. 4K isn't massively important to me. I'm a wedding photographer, but it could be really useful for you. I can't say. So just know that. So, but even then, you know, the 1.7 crop, might be actually useful for some people. Imagine if you're a wildlife photographer, let's say, and you want to get some footage that's a little bit further away, that 1.7 crop could be very, very useful. Again, that's your choice. In terms of sports photography, this is one where Canon is just, well, just don't bother, basically. 5 frames a second. Now, for me personally, as a wedding photographer, 5 frames a second is absolutely fine. But if you're someone that's shooting, like, I don't know, football fields or race cars or whatever it is, something fast moving, the Nikon's, I believe, at 12 frames a second, Sony's at 10 frames a second. So both reasonably respectable. It's not going to be like your high-end DSLRs, like the 1DX or the D5, but still, you're going to get the shots. Actually, oddly enough, Olympus blows them out the water, but that's another story. We're not going there. That's a micro four thirds. But yeah, in terms of frames per second, don't bother with the Canon. Basically, if you're shooting really fast stuff, it's just not going to keep up, and you're going to be very frustrated. Something else on the back of the camera in the actual ergonomic design, which I find very useful, is actually a thumbstick. Sony and Nikon have this. The Canon doesn't. They have the touchscreen, which is absolutely fine, but so do the Nikon and the Sony. The the thumbstick is actually very, very useful. Even on my 5D Mark IV, I still use the thumbstick all the time. I could use the actual touch to focus and take the picture. I don't. On my Sonys, I can still touch the screen to actually select my focus point. I don't. I use the thumbstick. That's just a personal preference. On the Canon side, they've chosen to actually remove it, and they've put this kind of like dial thing on there. It's early days. It might prove to be actually a very good choice for basically Canon, but again, we just don't know, because until we actually get these cameras in our hands as a general consumer, we just don't know at this point. But a thumbstick for me personally is very, very useful. Again, for you, it might not be. You know, you just tell me what you think about this. Ergonomically as well, all the cameras are pretty good, but the Sony is the smallest and lightest of the cameras. Both the Canon and the Nikon, they look like they're a little bit more substantial. So again, if you've got larger hands, you're going to find that those two particular cameras are going to be potentially better for you. For the Sonys, for me personally, I've got a small hand, and they absolutely work perfectly fine for me. But again, if you've got bigger than baby hands, yeah, probably not the Sony. This is kind of an interesting one as well, and that's the flip out screen or tilt screens. So the Sony and the Nikon both have tilt screens. The Canon has a flip out screen, so you can actually do your vlogging stuff and things like that. But remember, we've got a 1.7 crop in 4K, so that kind of makes it slightly redundant unless you shoot in 1080p, which is absolutely fine. I'm shooting this in 1080p actually. So again, it's kind of a difficult one. I like the features of a fully articulating screen that flips out and you can see yourself as you're basically videoing. That's exactly what I'm doing now. But a tilt screen for me as a wedding photographer, if I'm shooting basically something up high or something really, really low, it makes a big difference. What do I mean by this? So basically, this is just a Sony a7 III. I could just tilt it very, very simply. That for me at a wedding is absolutely ideal. But as far as vlogging, I'd want to see myself. So Canon wins on that one, and it's actually a really nice feature that they've put on there. Will it be on the higher end model camera when they bring that out? We don't know again. It's still kind of speculation on that kind of front. I can't imagine it is, because it's more for your vloggers kind of style people taking selfies, etc., or people like that. But I wouldn't imagine high-end kind of photographers are going to want that. I could be very, very wrong on that point, but again, it's all down to individual taste. Something Canon has left out their camera, which is, I'm really not sure why they've done this, and that is in-body image stabilization, or IBIS. Both Nikon and Sony have it. Canon, they basically said screw you and we're not putting it in. They have got a couple of new lenses that do have stabilization in them, which is, yeah, that's fine, but Sony have stabilized lenses and stabilization in the body, and I'm pretty sure Nikon will have this at some point as well. So that gives us 2 layers of stabilization, and if you're doing video stuff, in-body image stabilization is really useful. So again, I don't understand where Canon's coming from by not including this. if you're designing a camera from scratch, you can include this in your camera. So it's a bit of a random one why you wouldn't include this. So yeah, Canon, that's a bit silly really, if you ask me. But yeah, Nikon, Sony, they both have IBIS. So we're probably getting down to the most important part, at least I feel it's the most important part, and that is 2 card slots. Yes, we're back to that old story again. Both Nikon and Canon, I don't know what, just, did you have a brain fart? I mean, surely you've got a checklist of things that people will want in your cameras. 2 card slots is going to be right up there with, like, in the top 2 or 3 things that people want. 2 goddamn card slots. Not 1, 2. 2. Sony's got this, thankfully. Alright, the first couple of iterations of their cameras didn't, but the Mark IIIs do, thank God. As a professional, you know, photographer, I speak for the professionals at the moment, we will not accept having 1 card slot. 1 card slot is not enough. Even Nikon saying, oh, the new card system in our cameras is very reliable, etc, etc. If there's 1%, a single 1% chance that that card can fail, that is 100% too much. It doesn't matter, and I will not touch that camera with a barge pole. And that goes for Canon too. I'm sorry, I cannot do that for professional paid work. If I go to a wedding and I shoot a whole wedding day with a camera or 2 of those cameras and both cards fail me, like on 2 separate cameras, I'm screwed. I'm going to get sued. I can't risk it. So I'm sorry, but these new cameras, they are not aimed at professionals. The only way you could use them as a professional is in a studio environment with it tethered to a laptop. That's your only way. If you're out in the field shooting a wedding or shooting, I don't know, portraits of people, families, or whatever it is, you cannot use these cameras, in my professional opinion, as a professional work tool. You need 2 card slots. I'll say that again. Canon and Nikon, pull your finger out of your ass and give us 2 card slots. Nikon's excuse about saying we didn't have enough room to put 2 card slots in is, again, in my honest opinion, utter BS. You're designing a camera from scratch, you've got a blank piece of paper, and you start designing the camera. You can include 2 card slots in there. You just add that in a couple of extra millimeters and you've got 2 card slots. Same with Canon. You can have had 2 card slots very, very easily. So this is unforgivable. 2 card slots is an absolute must. Look, I know I just hit the card slots quite hard there, but it's a really important thing because, again, I don't want to get sued as a professional or working professional because this is my livelihood, this is my business, it's how I put food on the table for my family. So that's a really important part. Okay, so let's talk about something a little bit more light-hearted. So let's just say you are looking for a new camera system. You've been shooting, let's say, Canon for years or Nikon for years, and you just fancy changing things up. You don't mind selling a bunch of your gear off to actually invest into a new system. So which one do you buy? Are you going to stay brand loyal? And why? Why are you staying brand loyal? I personally, myself, I've been shooting Canon for years and years and years, and I've liked the quality I've been getting from them. The lenses are great, and a lot of people go, oh my god, you can't beat the L series lenses. Well, that was true. It very much was true. Now I'm not so sure, because the quality of the lenses that we're getting from third-party manufacturers, the Sigma art lenses, are basically outperforming any L lens that is on the market. That's just a hard, simple fact. It is. You can just go to DxOMark or look on all the reviews on YouTube, and you'll see everybody saying how good those lenses are. And the Sony lenses that are coming out now, they're incredibly good. So I'm sorry, just saying that the L lenses for Canon are the best lenses ever, that was true. Doesn't mean it's true anymore. You know, because they're getting some fantastic lenses that are coming out now. Incredibly sharp, fantastic bokeh on them, very little chromatic aberration, etc, etc, etc. So just saying that, you know, the older glass is brilliant, it's still very, very good. You can get incredible pictures with it, no question there. But you're going to get really good options from other parties, basically, now. So are you going to stay brand loyal? I'm not staying brand loyal. I've switched over to Sony. I've still got a bunch of my Canon gear because for my work, it basically allows me to. But if I was just a general consumer, it would sting my wallet quite heavily, moving brands. I've even invested a little bit into the Olympus kind of models, not a huge amount, but I absolutely love them because they give me a lot of money, a lot of bang for my buck, you might say. So my kind of thoughts for the future are this. It's still very early in this whole mirrorless war kind of scenario because at the moment Canon and Nikon is their first kind of generation of these cameras, and they will only get better as we go on. It's up to you whether you want to invest in those new camera bodies or not. I've got a friend of mine that's already pre-ordered the Canon EOS R and 1 or 2 of the lenses. He's got way too much money. Way too much. So I will get my hands on that camera once it arrives his end, and I'll be able to do a quick couple of videos on it, which I'm quite looking forward to. I want to see exactly how that performs. Early signs are it performs really well. If I can get my hands on the R mount system, Z mount system, sorry, for Nikon, I'll do the same, and hopefully that performs just as well. I mean, the early indications are that these cameras are fantastic. They're going to have brilliant image quality. The lenses are looking very, very good, etc, etc, etc. So yeah, it's still very early days, but it's good to see competition coming out that's actually challenging Sony. The competition now is looking fantastic. It's really good for us consumers because basically Sony, Nikon and Canon, they all want us to buy their products, so all they're going to do is basically push out better products. So that's enough of me talking rubbish for 10-15 minutes, however long this video is actually turning out to be. Let me know what your thoughts are going forward with the actual mirrorless cameras. Do you like the look of the Canon? Do you like the look of the Nikon? I think they've both got positives on them. I mean, some obviously negatives, like the dual card slots, obviously. But are you going to kind of buy one of them? Or are you going to basically go with the Sony? Or maybe you're looking for Fuji, because Fuji, keep your eye out on them. They're doing very, very well. Or maybe you've heard the rumours about Panasonic full frame, because if they bring all their features across from the G9 onto a full frame camera, that will mix things up quite considerably, because the G9 is a very, very good camera. It's a bit of a beast really with all the features. Anyway, enough of that rubbish. I don't know. Like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of YouTube stuff. And I will find you hopefully in the next video. And I hope so. Anyway, laters.